What is up, everybody? Welcome, Digital Bootcamp Session 6. So excited to have you here with us. Just as a quick reminder, we've said this every single time, every single week that we've met. 8 weeks worth of notes. I want you to take them on a notebook, in your phone, whatever. Show it to me or show it to your life group leader. And every single person who does that will be rewarded with a boot camp graduation gift. So I just want to encourage you to continue on, persevere, press on, as some of you already have been doing. We just concluded last week the Old Testament portion of this arc. And so we ended in the silence period. If you need to go back and watch that, go ahead and do that. But now what I want to do is I want to look at the three main genres that appear in the Old Testament. Now listen, before you turn this off, please stick with me because this is really important stuff. This may sound like English class, but the way that God's words have been preserved for us is through the Bible. And it's through His inspired text that we have. And so it's important for us to understand what type of things we're reading. Like let me give you an example. If you pull open Shakespeare, you can't read Shakespeare the same way that you might read a comic book, right? You have to know what type of reading style you're working with. And so what we're looking at right now is, and what we just spent the last several weeks on, is the historical portion. And so we went through all the different eras and all the different periods, and that's where you get story and narrative and things like that, right? You get David and Goliath, and you get Daniel and the lion's den, and you get Joseph and the coat of many colors. You get all these different things, and that's what we've been looking at, all right? And so real quick, as a summary, if you haven't gone and already seen these, then this will be just a quick overview. But if you have already seen these, this will just be a hopefully helpful review for you. We have the creation period. We have Adam in the Garden of Eden. Adam is created by God, but Adam sins. He destroys God's original plan for man. We have the patriarch period, central figure by the name of Abraham, which took place in the land of Canaan after he moved from his hometown, the land of Ur. Abraham is chosen by God to father a people to represent God to the rest of the world. Then we have the Exodus, and so when God's people landed in Exodus, God chose to use Moses in the land of Egypt, and through him deliver the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt, and then ultimately give them the law, give them God's words and God's commands on how to live. We have the conquest period, and that's where Joshua is the central figure, and they go back to Abraham's land, back to the land of Canaan. Joshua leads the conquest of the promised land. Joshua is an incredible military hero, and his tactics are still studied today in some different war techniques. We have then the time period of Judges, and our central figure, perhaps the most well-known, is the guy Samson, long hair, really strong, vow of the Nazarite, again took place in Canaan. And Samson and other judges were chosen to be judges to govern the people during 400 rebellious years. Out of that, the people of Israel demanded a king. God gave them a king. The most prominent king we know is King David, also the guy who slayed and fought Goliath. Location in the land of Israel. And David is the greatest king in a new monarchy, and he's followed by a succession of mostly unrighteous kings. And God eventually judges Israel for her sin and sends them on into exile. In exile, we have Daniel. It took place in the land of Babylon, and Daniel gave leadership and encouraged his faithfulness among the exiles for around 70 years. And then in the return, we have a guy named Ezra. He goes back to the city of Jerusalem. He leads the people out of exile to help rebuild Jerusalem, and then silence. And the Pharisees in Jerusalem and the Sadducees also, they kind of pop up, and the Pharisees and others entomb Israel in legalism for the next 400 years, leaving Israel ripe for a savior. So that's the historical period. Right? That's everything from Genesis to the end of the Old Testament about the historical narratives and those books. And so that's why you see all these different things, Ezra and Nehemiah and Genesis and Exodus and all these things. But woven in there, all right, and here's where the Bible gets tricky and confusing. Woven in there are different literary types. And so we have Genesis all the way through 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Boom, that's it. That's where it stops. Genesis through Esther is your historical clump of books, okay? And so you have all your history in there. Then you have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Those 5 books are your poetical books. So in fact, many people actually think that Job, the book of Job, the time period that happened, took place prior to Abraham. Okay? What Job is not a narrative or a historical version of writing. Job is wisdom literature. It's poetical, all right? It's actually written in such a structure. You see Job go through all this hard time, and then he has 3 friends come, and so it's Job talks or has something happen to him. One friend responds, another friend responds, another friend responds. Job responds to them. Then another friend responds, same order. Another friend, right? Job responds. And then those 3 friends go again. It's written in a structure in a way that would be recognizable as poetry in that day. And so what's confusing about the Bible is you think I'm going to start in Genesis, I'm going to read all the way through the Old Testament, but the Bible is actually broken up into different categories. And so when you're in these sections here of poetical, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, you're reading poetry, you're reading wisdom literature, you're reading songs. And remember, they were written in Hebrew. And so the way that a Hebrew poet understands things is different than how an English poet reads and interprets and understands things. And so it's really important to know what section you're in, all right? And so I'm going to just walk you through what these 5 books are and just kind of a big umbrella picture of what they are. And then we'll dive into the prophetical section, kind of explain that stuff, and then we're on to the New Testament. All right, so Job is a book about suffering and about God's sovereignty. Sovereignty is a big word for just the fact that God is in control. And God has a plan, and Job suffered, and even in Job's suffering, God still had a plan for Job's suffering. Psalms is a book of praise in public worship. And so half of it was written by David, our friend from the kingdom period that also defeated Goliath. But the other half were written by a various number of authors. I think Moses slides in there, Daniel, Solomon has some Psalms. And so it's all kinds of different authors and people that we have that pen and write these Psalms, these praise and public worship things. We have Proverbs, which is practical wisdom and skills for living. We have the book of Ecclesiastes, and let me just say, Ecclesiastes is one of my absolute personal favorite books in the whole Bible. And so if you've never checked it out, it's only 12 chapters. It's not super long. I want to encourage you, just go check it out. It's written by Solomon, the wisest man on earth, and he looks at the futility of temporal pleasures. And so that's just big words. Remember, I stole a lot of this stuff from 30 Days to Understanding the Bible, but this is adult lingo for there's just not a lot of value in temporary pleasure. Like, yeah, you can get rich here on earth, but what good does it last you, right? And that's from the wisest man who ever lived. And so I think there is some merit that we can see there. And then finally, Song of Solomon. Some of your books, some of your Bibles may have it labeled Song of Songs, but this is God's marriage manual. This is God's advice for married couples. And so those are the 5 kind of poetical things. And then we move out of, so we got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. And then from there on, we move into the major and minor prophets. And so that's one of the things in the prophetic language, we have major prophets and minor prophets. Here's how they're broken down. Ready? Major prophets are longer books. Minor prophets are shorter books. That's it. All right? Isaiah is not more important than Hosea, and Jeremiah is not more important than Malachi. It's just they have longer writings. They have longer chapters and bigger books. So we got major and minor. That's it. But again, it breaks up in the major prophets first, and then it flows into the minors. It's not chronological. All right? That's the main distinction is how they're broken up. And so in our prophecies, okay, we have it written in 3 time periods. Pre-exile, so before they're going to Babylon, before they maybe even know who their captors will be. Often it's a warning, hey, watch out for this. You better start obeying or God's going to get his revenge. God's going to enact a punishment for your disobedience. We have during the exile, and it's a lot of Daniel and just the encouragement of another guy, Ezekiel. And then we have post-exile, and that's after the exile to those people. We also have them written to different audiences. And listen, I think that perhaps one of the most underknown things in the whole Bible is this right here. Because what you need to know is, first of all, pre-exile, during exile, post-exile, and then who is the audience written to and what was going on in that context. And so right here, I'm going to give you a quick flyby. So this is where it's really important for you to take notes, all right? And this is going to be important. You can reference this the rest of your life because this is stuff that I don't spend as much time in the prophets as I would like to either. And so there are times I have to look back and remind myself of things I learned all the way back in Bible college of what is this book in reference to? Who is the book of Isaiah aimed at? What people group is it being written towards, okay? And so first we're going to work through pre-exile, all right? And so in pre-exile, to the nation of Israel, we have two books, Hosea and Amos. Now remember, Israel is different than Judah. Judah are the two tribes now at this point, and Israel are the other 10 remaining tribes that have been scattered, never to be heard from again, sort of, all right? And then also in pre-exile, man, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that little typo right there. Just focus on this Judah part, okay? In pre-exile, to Judah, we have Habakkuk, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Joel, Micah, Zephaniah, and Lamentations, all focused to the tribe of Judah. Again, remember, Judah, those two tribes remaining, and then Israel, those 10 tribes, they're different, right? Now, this is the things that was a typo because I knew it was in the way, but I forgot to erase them, so forgive me. This is to Assyria, all right? Now, remember, Assyria actually comes before Babylon, I believe. And so Jonah and Nahum were written to Assyria. And then to the nation of Edom, we have the book of Obadiah. And so we have 4 different audiences, 4 different nations that are being addressed in our pre-exile prophecies. And then during the exile, all right, from the nation of Babylon, written by Jewish people of God, we have Ezekiel, and we have Daniel. We talked about that quite a bit last week, or 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry. And then we have after the exile, after it's over, after the return, during the rebuilding of the walls, and Ezra and Nehemiah and all these things. We have Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And so these people right here are written after the nation of Israel has happened. And so let me turn this off so that you don't keep getting interrupted by it. These are 2 different types of things happening in prophetic literature. Number 1, foretelling. And that is prediction of what is to come. I'll challenge you. At one time, go look at the last half of the book of Daniel, chapter 7 through, I believe, 12 it is, and that is the foretelling of what is to come of the nation of Babylon. So it predicts the Persians who overtakes them. And it might even predict the Greeks who come in and overtake the Persians. And so you can look at the prophecy, and you have to read and understand the prophetic language, and so you'll probably have to get a commentary to siphon through what Daniel's saying, but then you take that and you compare it to the actual history of what has happened in the world, and we can look at that just by opening a history book, and it matches precisely. And so how cool is it that we have God who's predicting and telling of what is to come? But we also have forthtelling. And what's different between foretelling and forthtelling is forthtelling is honestly just preaching. And so it's proclaiming the preaching and teachings of God and reminders of things to the nation of Israel. And this is honestly a lot more like what pastors do, right? Pastor Brad, myself, other guys who get up in the pulpit here at LHC, we're telling you, hey, here's what God's word says, and we're packaging it and telling it in a way that is understandable, hopefully, and able to resonate in your life, and also practical ways that you can take it home and live it out. And so in a lot of times, the prophets are giving this information to the nation and people of Israel as just reminders. They're being pastors, okay? And so there's just some different things that they talk about. One is they expose sin and they call people to live a higher lifestyle, right lifestyle. They warn them of judgment. They say, hey, listen, if you don't change, if you don't reform, you're going to be in trouble. And then finally, they proclaim and remind of the coming Messiah, Jesus. And so listen, again, we have historical, we have poetical, we have prophetical. Those are the 3 breakdowns of the Old Testament. And it's helpful, I think, for some of you guys to know who it's written to, what it's written about, when it was written in kind of the context of exile, post-exile, because a lot of it is surrounding the impending doom of the exile. God's like, listen, I gave you this land, but I'll take it away if you don't listen. Sounds a lot like a parent, right? So knowing that stuff when you go into it helps you read the Bible better. All right, we made it. We're through the Old Testament. Next week, join us for session 7. We have 2 left. We're going to dive into the New Testament, look at Jesus and the gospel and the missionary journeys of Paul. It's going to be fascinating. Hope you join us. Can't wait to see you then. Until next week, have a good rest of your week, guys, and we'll see you Digital Boot Camp next time.